are a peace organization, and throughout the last years, and even through this election season, we have been in a situation where issues of war and peace and the military budget neglected because the United States has been at peace all the time, but we actually haven't been, right? So there's an ongoing set of unaddressed issues that need addressing, and which I think it's fair to say have become much more scary now that Donald Trump is the president. When we had just the obvious example of drones, it wasn't that phenomenal that Obama claimed the right to assassinate whoever he wanted, but some people felt, well, he doesn't want to assassinate that many people, he's a legal scholar, whatever. Okay, so now we have Donald Trump, who also now has the ability to assassinate whoever he wants or put them in secret prisons and so forth and so on. So, I mean, all sorts of ways, and I think he's been very unpredictable, but I don't think anybody in this room thinks that we're moving into a peaceful era because this person has come into the White House. So, you know, one of our concerns, obviously, and it's consistent with what we've been worried about for decades, is, how can we here in Brooklyn and, of course, across the country address the whole question of American militarism, the ongoing wars that are going in many, many corners of the world, as well as a national budget in which military spending essentially outstrips anything else. So that's, kind of familiar piece. The other piece, which makes this meeting a little bit different, is I think one thing we've all seen throughout the country is that Donald Trump poses a threat to so many things. It's like if you go offline for 2 hours and then you go back on, somebody has been appointed to destroy something, right? And the only question is like, what is going to get destroyed? Would it be education? Would it be hospitals? Would it be housing? Right? I mean, everything is going wrong, and everything is endangered in a way that we never imagined. So one positive thing that has happened is that, and I think probably all of you in this room are aware of it, is that there's been a tremendous upsurge in public activity. Right? Suddenly there are political groups all over the place. I don't know about others here, but like my Facebook has changed. People have stopped posting pictures of their puppies and whatever, and their vacations, and are talking about politics. Right. I mean, so we're having this great upsurge, and that's the one really positive thing that's happening. However, and this is kind of the hope for tonight, is I think that there is also a very strong sense, not just in Brooklyn for Peace, but in people all around the city, all around this country, that we need to be active across a wide range of things, but also we need to find ways to unify. And I really want to emphasize that. We need to find ways to unify. We now have a president a Supreme Court that's divided. We have a House and Senate that is in Republican hands. This is an open field for an overpowerful executive to do amazingly terrible things. And I think there's a sensibility that if we stay in our little silos and don't really find a way to build strength, we are going to be too weak. Right, that we have to find ways to cooperate. And everybody sort of says that all along anyway, but we actually mean it now. Like, how in the world are we going to cooperate? And just real quickly on Brooklyn, I think it's not irrelevant that the single most powerful Democrat in the United States is about 2 miles from here, right? Is Charles Schumer. How he behaves about a lot of things is enormously significant. And some people in this room have probably noticed that he's not always wonderful. His natural instincts is how can I make the world a better place? So part of what the other motivation for tonight is really, is a sense that we have, and that probably most of you have, about the need to unify. And our intention tonight is we have people from some different groups that are active in Brooklyn. And so a big part of it tonight is just informational, literally for people in the room to hear what different groups in Brooklyn are doing. So we have that in our head. And then we would like to move from that into a discussion about, what is the way forward? And because I'm a very old lady now, and I've been to so many meetings, I can't count them, and all those meetings that you go to where you say, nothing came out of this meeting, I was there for 2 hours. Well, I just want to sort of say in advance, nothing might come out of tonight except thinking. Really, you know what I'm saying? I mean, we're not gathering people here to make a decision and vote on a platform. We're here to listen, learn from each other, share some ideas, understanding that this is a new situation for all of us. I'm going to turn this over to Bruce. for the first part of the meeting, which is going to be hearing from people on different Brooklyn groups who are in motion.
We had so many people who wanted to speak about their groups, which is great, because it means a lot of things are getting done. We divided people into two sets. We've got 7 people who will talk for about 3 to 5 minutes to tell us what their group is doing in reaction to Trump's election. And then we've got a number of other people who will speak a little more briefly about what they're doing. In case anybody starts to run over time, I'll sort of wave.
And then we'll leave time for a general discussion after that.
Hopefully we'll have enough time that people will be able to talk as well. So we're going to start with Molly Nolan, who's going to talk about the Brad Lander initiative.
I've been involved with 2 groups of activists. One is attending the Brad Lander meetings, which I'll talk about in a minute, and the other is activism that's going on at NYU, where I teach, which parallels activism going on lots of campuses, which centers first and foremost on what it might be to make various universities sanctuary campuses so that undocumented students, staff, and in some cases faculty will be protected. I've been to the first 2 Brad Lander meetings. He called a week after the election a Let's Get Organized meeting. 1,000 people came to the Garfield Temple, and at that meeting various groups presented what they were doing. At the second meeting, which about 700 people came to, we divided up into a variety of groups to begin to talk concretely about what could be done on a variety of issues, whether it was schools, immigrants, Islamophobia, thinking about next elections, protecting women's reproductive rights, dealing with racial issues. 3 things are important. One is the enormous outpouring of people who are there and who seem willing to dig in for the long haul. The second important thing is that much of what people are thinking about is how to defend against the very worst things that are happening at the moment, how to really protect people who are most endangered. The third thing, which is of particular interest to those of us from a group concerned with militarism in peace, is that those issues have been every bit as much off the agenda organizing there, also at NYU, as they were during the election. And it seems to me one of the real challenges for people concerned about the militarization of our society, the enormous size of the military budget, and the catastrophic foreign policy, which endangers many in our community, which is key to why we are having the global refugee crisis that we're having. We have to figure out how to work with other groups to make those connections, to explain why some of the problems we're facing have to deal with that, and to combat some of what Trump's foreign policy might be. And everyone is really having a hard time figuring out what it's going to be, but it's probably not going to be good on any number of issues. Starting with, for example, the Iran nuclear deal, vast increases in the size of the military budget, and the like. So that is, I think, a challenge for all of us. The one takeaway I'd like to share with the organizing on campus at NYU, which is, first, how do we protect the many undocumented who are there? How do we combat Islamophobia? How do you make the idea of sanctuary not just rhetorical but real? And students and the faculty of Color Caucus has done really very, very important work on that, although administrations are reluctant to commit to something like sanctuary. We have people like Ken Langone on our board of trustees, and let me tell you, the president doesn't want to offend him. So that's a real battle there. Students want to be involved. They often don't know about groups outside in the community, and we're trying to put them in touch with groups to know what they can do on campus and off. But one of the things people have also stressed, and I think we need to think about, is how to build transnational connections, because in many other countries, the resurgence of xenophobic, neo-fascist regimes, very dangerous kinds of nationalism are happening, and we need to not only think about our situation here, but build bridges with others. to whom we can combat what is happening that is so dangerous.
The next speaker is Mimi Bluestone from 350 Brooklyn.
So I'm from 350 Brooklyn. We're a local affiliate of the international climate organization 350.org. Our focus tends to be more regional, more local. We obviously have an international crisis going on in terms of climate, and we also have a national crisis because we are looking at a cabinet chock full of climate deniers, which is just the height of insanity. And that's not our focus in 350 Brooklyn. There are a lot of national organizations that are really taking that on, and we support that. 350.org has petitions against Tillerson as Secretary of State and Scott Pruitt as EPA Director. We're kind of doubling down on something that we were already doing, and I think it takes on more importance as we approach the Trump administration. We're kind of focusing on stuff going on in our region. We've been focusing on stopping fossil fuel infrastructure. Let me just ask, I mean, we did this the other night at our meeting, our 350 Brooklyn meeting, but let me just ask, how many people here have been following what's been going on at Standing Rock? Okay, so everybody knows what's going on at Standing Rock. How many people here are familiar with the Spectra-AIM pipeline? Okay, so not as many of you. How many people have heard of, okay, the Spectra-AIM pipeline is a pipeline that's just gone operational. It's a natural gas pipeline, fracked gas, from Ohio and Pennsylvania, a pipeline that runs 105 feet from vital infrastructure at the Indian Point nuclear power plant right on the Hudson River, 24 miles north of New York City. So, you know, it has a much more immediate potential impact on us than Standing Rock, although all of these struggles are completely connected, and in fact, some of the same companies who are involved in Standing Rock are also involved in the Spectra-AIM pipeline. How many people here have heard of the Pilgrim pipelines? Okay, so again, not as many. There's a plan. There was a plan under consideration to build two pipelines, one running north, one running south, from Albany to Linden, New Jersey, that would carry Bakken shale oil and possibly fracked oil. And we're talking about some of the most toxic, dirty, dangerous, explosive stuff on Earth. Carry it by pipeline along the Hudson. A lot of it goes through along the Thruway, in the Thruway right-of-way, in case you ever drive on the New York Thruway. And so it would carry this very toxic fuel from Albany, which has become a major hub of energy transfer, down to Linden, New Jersey. It would be refined there and then shipped back up via the pipeline. So we're gearing up for that fight. We know that fight is coming. You know, we're not quite there yet, but we know it's coming, and we're gearing up for that. We also know that there's a plan. They just closed the public comment period. There's a plan to build 42 anchorages in the Hudson River for oil barges, again, to carry the same disgusting material that we really don't need and that's killing the planet. So these are regional struggles that we are involved in, and that's part of our overall need to keep it in the ground, to keep fossil fuels in the ground. On the flip side of that, we need to promote the most immediate transition to clean, renewable energy that's possible. As far as that goes, we are participating with the Sierra Club's Beyond Coal campaign. I have petitions here that I have a petition that I'd like to circulate to Governor Cuomo to accelerate the offshore wind development off Long Island and the Rockaways. We lag incredibly as a nation in terms of offshore wind. The first and only set of offshore wind turbines just came online last week off Block Island. And we have this enormous potential in our region to develop this resource. So we are pushing to promote that. We're going to be at a Long Island Power Authority hearing on Tuesday to deliver these petitions, which ultimately are aimed at the governor. And, you know, we have a bus. Sierra Club is organizing a bus from Manhattan. You know, we encourage anybody who's able to come on Tuesday to join us on Long Island. And in addition to that, we're part of a coalition that I think speaks to the need to get out of our silos, which is called the New York Renews Coalition, and it's made up of 100 groups statewide. And these are environmental justice groups, labor unions, faith organizations. It's a very wide gamut of organizations, and we are all pushing for something called the Climate Community Protection Act. And we're asking everybody to call Governor Cuomo every Thursday from now until the State of the State in January and tell him that we want him to put this in his budget for 2017. We know what a crisis this is in terms of Trump and national policy. It's really important for New York and states like New York and California to take a lead on climate. So it's really important for us to push this New York Renews program.
This is Ken Diamondstone, who's going to talk about the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network.
You probably haven't heard of it at this point. The Brooklyn Progressive Action Network is one of 5 groups around the state comprising the New York State Progressive Action Network. A week ago Saturday, we all met at Stuyvesant High School, people from around the state. Over 500 were there, a number of electeds, people, many of the former Bernie people, but people across the spectrum of the left. And we again felt that we needed to have linkages, break down silos, and work both in the political sphere and at the grassroots level, advocating for issues, but perhaps endorsing candidates at some point down the line. The first 2 things that the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network has been involved in is beginning to evaluate how we deal with election law in New York State. If you recall, there were 3 million people who couldn't vote in the primaries because they hadn't registered prior to 6 months before the primaries. Most people didn't know who was going to run. Most people didn't know it was going to be an issue, so they didn't register. And there are many people who register as so-called independents, not knowing that that precludes them from being in the most important aspect of our elections, which is the primaries. So that's one aspect. We want to change the election law so that we have day of election registration, early voting, a number of changes that we believe would change the tenor of our democracy in New York. The other issue was to address the issue of fossil fuels. Our immediate issue was the Dakota Access Pipeline. Our first effort was to try and recruit city council members, and several of them have been extremely excited about a resolution asking the pension funds and our controller to divest from the pension funds. To divest the pension funds from the banks and the fossil fuel industry. So those are the 2 things that we're working on. We're working with Tish James and others who are excited about this, and we'll have more to say later on. Thanks.
What's the name of the organization?
It's called the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network, BPAN. And I hope that we'll be able to talk about that more.
Our next speaker is Debbie Allen-Tosser from the Muslim Community Network.
I can't believe here we are again on something very important and critical, and it takes somebody like a Bush, who's a Trump now, to bring us all together. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces. I just feel in such good company. We all are feeling just very distraught and raw and can't believe the time that we're living in. This is actually my 5th meeting, and I didn't even know I was on the agenda, so I'm glad I actually came, because that would have been a problem. But I appreciate you giving me the opportunity just to really give you a snapshot of what's actually happening in the American Muslim community. I'm sure that many of you have been actually seeing a lot of news along the lines of hate crimes and what's happening. There are a lot of incidents, unfortunately, that are also not being reported for a variety of reasons. One, the victims don't want publicity. 2, some of the victims are not even reporting the incidents. And so this is something that we're dealing with within the community to help educate the community that they have to report them, so that way we have an understanding of what's actually happening. So I want to share with you some statistics of what has occurred in regards to they're all incidents, and some of them are hate crimes, some of them are verbal, some of them are harassment, and what have you. So in total, since Election Day, up until yesterday, there have been 65 incidents that American Muslims have experienced, and I'll give you the breakdown.
Locally or?
In New York City. Yes. Okay. So 8 of them have been public accommodation and government services, people going in and requesting a service and being denied or harassed. There have been 4 in New York City schools to children. There has been 1 denial of service in a it's a non-governmental place. There have been 10 hate crimes and physical violence. So these are hate crimes that actually basically were physical. There have been 17 law enforcement incidents, and I'll give you just an example of some of them. What we've been experiencing is that there are members of the Muslim community that have people calling 911 for suspicious activity. An example of this is my friend Zainab, who's actually a Latina Muslim who lives in Bay Ridge, goes to the gym in Bay Ridge, decided to get there early, found a parking spot, and sat in her car for 20 minutes making phone calls and texting. Someone in the neighborhood saw her there. They called 911. Towards the end of the 20 minutes that she was there, what ended up happening is she was walking out of her car, 2 police cars roll up. 2 police officers come out and ask her a whole bunch of questions for over 10 minutes. They didn't believe that she was a resident in Bay Ridge. She showed them her driver's license, which was a Florida license. They still didn't believe her. They asked her if she has a utility bill to show them. Didn't believe her. She invited them to go to the gym with her. They weren't interested eventually, but they basically left her with the notion that there was an open case. And so after they left, she contacted a couple of people, including myself, and she was freaking out because they told her there was an open case. So if a police officer tells you there's an open case, what are you gonna think? So she spent 24 hours in, just worrying about what this open case is. We contacted the local precinct. We couldn't get any information of what was the situation. We called One Police Plaza. They looked into it, and it was a neighbor in the neighborhood who decided to call. And the reason that they went out was because a person left their name and they wanted a report back. So what we instructed her to do was to actually file a complaint with the Civilian Complaint Board, and she's done that. And right now, what we're doing with Brooklyn South, the NYPD, is working with them to do a Know Your Rights, not necessarily for the community, but more for them in terms of how they need to be culturally sensitive. Many of the members of the Muslim community is already feeling victimized, and then when you are harassed by law enforcement, it's doubly victimized. So that's some of the incidents that we're facing in terms of law enforcement. There have been 19 harassments, just simply people walking in the street and someone saying something to them. And there have been 6 vandalizations. It's horrible, it's horrific. I don't know what to tell you, but this, resonates for me just like the days after September 11th, and I feel like right now it's much more heightened. The fear in the community right now with the new administration coming in is along the lines of this registry. What is it? What is it going to be? Is it similar to the sneers, if you all remember, after September 11th, where we had, the 22 nations, the axis of evil, where men the ages of 16 and I think 35 or 45 had to register. So nobody really knows what is going on. I actually went to a meeting on Monday, a national summit of Muslim leaders from across the country in DC, and what we did was just simply start looking at what has taken place in the past and what the possibilities are and what we can organize and do. What it all boiled down to for each of us is to really go back into our local communities. And as you all know, all politics are local, is really organizing within our own locales and figuring out what works best for us. And as more information comes down from this administration in terms of what they're planning to do, then we just need to calibrate and do what we need to do. On a local New York State level, I don't know if any of you heard today, Trump met with Peter King, Congressman Peter King. And his recommendation to the new president-elect is to actually develop or reinstate, or whatever you want to call it, Muslim surveillance on a national level. So this is what we're dealing with on a state level, is someone such as him, proposing this. There is nothing else. There's so much I could tell you, but I don't want to take up the time because I feel like a lot of people have come to ask questions, to learn, to mobilize, to organize. So I'm going to end here. I will be here for the duration of the meeting. If anyone wants to come see me, please feel free to do so. I should tell you one more thing because I just remembered my organization. The Muslim Community Network, which is a nonprofit here in New York City, does citywide work. On November 9th, serendipitously, this was not planned. We actually put up on our Facebook page a self-defense class. Within 10 hours, it was sold out. Our Facebook page was actually shared over 400 times, and we had 2,700 women who signed up for self-defense classes. Sadly, these women are not all Muslim. Majority are Muslim, but there are actually Jewish women, African American women, Latina and immigrant women, and gender nonconforming women who actually want this training. So we've already done 3 classes. We've accommodated 260 of these women. We still have 2,400, a little over, that we need to. Obviously, funding is an issue. It's a monthly workshop that we were planning to do. We had no idea that this many women were going to actually apply for it. So stay tuned. There's actually been press about it. And we're praying that people will make small donations onto our website, whatever, to just help us make sure that each and every one of these women feels safe. Thank you.
Thank you. So thank you so much for inviting me out here. My name is Antonine Pierre. I work in an organization called the Brooklyn Movement Center. We are a community-based organization. We're based in Bed-Stuy and Crown Heights. We work in central Brooklyn. We do this local organizing that this sister was just talking about, right? Like, we really are focused on how do we do self-determination work in a historically Black neighborhood that is being highly gentrified, and how are we doing work that is also being done in lots of other Black neighborhoods around the city, and linking our efforts citywide to really change, or really stop and change a lot of the things that are happening in this city. So when we look at Trump, I apologize, it's so hot in here.
You want to sit down?
No, I'm gonna take the sweatshirt off because I dressed for a very different type of weather today. Y'all are some good people. Thank you. So the work that we do at the Brooklyn Movement Center, and I have some cards that I'm gonna ask for some of you good people to help me hand out. Thank you so much, Ed. All right, we're a multi-issue group, and that means that we are inherently devoted to the self-determination and building the leadership out of Central Brooklyn. And for us, that looks like being a multi-issue organization. That looks like working on policing, on gender and sexualized street harassment, on citizen journalism, like really asking the right questions about gentrification, on environmental justice, and food justice as well. So when we think about Trump organizing, on November 9th, when we were in our office, actually, we were supposed to be preparing for a town hall about policing in Crown Heights. We realized that the work is, we were gonna have to really make some tough choices to really be in integrity around the campaigns and the work that we're already devoted to, and to be able to do some of these pivots that would really be necessary to make sure that we're really responding to this horrible Trump administration that we were about to be up against. So what that looked like for us was that we had a post-election gathering a few weeks later, and we brought together all of our members to say, hey, members and new people, right? Lots of people were like, we're excited, we want to be down, we want to do the thing. So to bring people in and to say, let's actually look at our work, let's look at our campaigns, let's think realistically about what the opportunities and threats are going to be in the coming administration, and let's set some goals. Let's also, again, recommit to these things and not say that all of a sudden we're going to be doing immigration work, but how can we partner or continue to partner with orgs that we already work with, like the Black Alliance for Just Immigration, like Desi's Rising Up and Moving. So when I talk about like the work that we're doing in terms of Trump administration, anti-Trump administration organizing, the biggest places where we're seeing we're going to have impact is really around police accountability and around community safety. So in our police accountability work, we have a cop watch team in Crown Heights. We're in the process of forming a rapid response team that would respond not only to incidences of police brutality, but would be able to respond on a policy level. So to be able to mobilize people very quickly to do like packing the courts and being able to do rallies and press conferences. So we're in the process of starting our rapid response team. And we are doing policy work. We're on the steering committee of Communities United for Police Reform. So we're still pushing for the Right to Know Act. We're still pushing to get some accountability from Mayor de Blasio around the killing of Ramarley Graham 5 years ago. So we see all of these things as really being vital, not only in changing the current system as we know it, in terms of police accountability, but really, how are we self-determining ourselves? How are we self-determining? How are we actually creating systems that live outside of policing? Because we know that we can't just say that we're going to either get rid of police or reform police, but how are we actually decreasing Central Brooklyn's reliance on police and policing? So part of another piece of that work is also with Communities United for Police Reform, being able to gather information and data on who is actually doing community safety and community policing, alternatives to policing, I should say, practices. So, for example, the Brooklyn Movement Center, with our anti-street harassment work, we have a bike patrol. And bike patrol is like groups of women and gender nonconforming people who are frequently harassed, going out on bicycles and intercepting harassment, I should say, and also giving people information about what it's, about how to protect yourself and how to actually de-escalate instances of harassment. So that's a kind of thing that is actually often not thought of as an alternative to policing. So we're looking to talk to other folks who are also doing alternatives to policing around gun violence, around domestic violence, around violence that happens in our neighborhoods and our streets, so that we can start to say, actually, this is what a world without police would actually look like. This is not like a fun visioning activity. These are the concrete things that would make a community without policing. This is what it would look like. So I say all of us to say we're really pissed and mad about Trump, like everyone here, and we're really redoubling our efforts in terms of community policing because we see that as being not only the work that is most can be within our organization will be most viscerally attacked, but there's also the greatest opportunity for us to be generative, for us to not always be on defense, for us to play a little bit of offense here. And we're also thinking about what does it mean for us to be able to bring people together in this time of crisis within the police accountability work and sustain it, right? So I think November 9th, everyone was making phone calls, everyone wanted to join a thing. And when we had our meeting, it was really important to say, look, we know a lot of you aren't gonna be here 6 months from now. And to really keep it real with folks, because we understand that our job is to agitate and our job is to let people know that the work is gonna be ongoing and that we're gonna be here through Trump or what have you. And it's great to have people be excited and be mobilized, and we also just need to keep doing the work that we've always been doing. So I also did want to add that we are also, again, in terms of being integrity, we're not trying to recreate the wheel. We're not trying to suddenly say that we do anti-hate violence work, because we don't. But what we are doing is thinking about, well, what do safe communities look like outside of alternatives to policing? What does it look like? What do we need to have in place to be able to even direct people to respond to the kinds of hate violence that we are going to be seeing very soon? Great, so I know you've all got those cards. Can I leave some cards for people to sign? Okay, great, so I'll leave them at the front and I'll be here.
Okay, thank you. Okay, now we have a second set of speakers who will speak for just about a minute or two what they're doing. Juliette Uccelli. Juliette's from Freedom Road Socialist Organization.
We're a group that's national. Like many groups, our best work is not in New York. Comrades in North Carolina with a very big struggle against disenfranchisement, particularly of African American and other voters of color, with situations where when cities pass progressive laws, governments can nullify them, a thing that we deal with as well. 32 state legislatures where Republicans control both houses and now all three branches of the federal government. It's quite a synergy. 5 points of orientation, which kind of summarize things I think different people have expressed. So the 5 are: expect Trump to divide and conquer. Number 2, fight for both social and economic justice. Number 3, don't trash each other's forms of struggle. Number 4, fight in the streets, the suites, and in communities of solidarity. And number 5, exploit divisions among the ruling elite and make tactical alliances with them, such as Trump versus the intelligence and State Department establishment, probably divisions in the military around Mad Dog Mattis and that lunatic Flynn. We have to exploit all those kinds of contradictions, really to try to reignite our consciousness of our internationalist duty, because I don't know what the F is going to happen, but it's not going to be good. So that was brief, right? I could go into each of these 5, but I think you get the idea.
Next is Ann Fawcett Ambia, who's going to talk about Bay Ridge for Social Justice.
I live in Bay Ridge, which, as most of you probably know, has a very large Muslim community. Before Trump got started, there was an incident of a woman being harassed a couple of blocks from my house, and in response, there was a community march, and at the end of it, the people met in a meeting hall in a church, and we got started. Now, since the Trump thing started, we've become much more organized. We're actually part of and affiliated with the Arab American Association of New York, which is located in Bay Ridge. At the moment, we have another march that we're planning on Martin Luther King Day. But one of the biggest issues that we're trying to address is the need for rapid response, which you don't get when you call 911. And as other speakers have pointed out, it's often not a good idea to call 911 anyway. And in the middle of a crime happening, what can you do? Well, there's this great thing that happened. A woman in Harlem got harassed on her way home from work on mass transit, and she put out a call for someone to accompany her. Within 3 days, there have been 8,300 responses to this, which is awesome. So Kayla Santos Suoso, who is working at Arab American Association and is one of the founders of Bay Ridge for Social Justice, is now working on an Accompany Your Neighbor program that's working with the 8,300 people, or part of us, and she's organizing a number of trainings, bystander intervention trainings. There have been 5 of them that she's organized so far. They've been booked solid as soon as they hit the press. So that's one thing that we're doing. Another thing that we're doing is trying to set up safe refuges for people who are being harassed, who are on the street, where they can go. And in light of that, what we're working on is trying to set up, working on developing posters. Well, this is my little non-artistic rendering for a first draft to take to the next meeting, to put in store windows offering refuge for people. Enter here if you're being threatened because of your race, gender, or religion. And we're hoping to expand from there, from storefronts to other places in the community. Anybody who lives in Bay Ridge or who wants to get involved in the Accompany Project and go to a training can contact Kayla at Kayla, that's her name, at arabamericanny.org. In addition, yesterday, Keith, who's going to speak after me, and I went to a hate crimes call to action meeting that was organized by Senator Jesse Hamilton. This great woman was on the stage, Jenny DeBauer, from the Center for Anti-Violence Education in Brooklyn, who also said that people can contact her. She's also got funding to organize bystander intervention trainings. Jenny at CAENY.org. Then because Keith and I spoke at the meeting yesterday, someone came up to us and told us that there is a rapid response network that's being established in Brooklyn, and you can get information from them on thebasebk.org. So these are the things that we're working on, and that's about all that I want to say, except that we're working on another point to this is, and this was made really clear at the hate crimes meeting yesterday, where people from agencies are on the stage and their response is kind of call 311, call 911, call do this, do that, none of which, I mean, I'm not saying people shouldn't, you should, things need to be reported, but in the meantime, what would it look like in New York City if we actually had support for programs that made people feel safe to walk on in our streets? And we have a couple of ideas on that line, but I'm going to stop talking now and let Keith talk next.
Okay, so we've introduced Keith Brooks from Occupy Kensington.
I'm from Occupy Kensington. Kensington, I don't know if people know, it's a neighborhood where there's actually been a lot of spontaneous or seemingly spontaneous reaction to the hate crimes that have gone on. A group of people went to the subway stop, the F train, the other day with signs just like that. I'm not sure, if they were from Occupy Kensington or whatever. There were other people who have been out organizing. There's a group, Occupy Kensington's had meetings. The thrust of it is, twofold, as many of these things are. One is against tax on immigrants, and the other one is in relation to hate crimes. And there's a meeting this Sunday night. Sue, if you want to add to that for a minute. No? Okay. But the other thing is that just in the last few days of being active, and last week or so, of going to a intervention workshop and what's his name's Hamilton's forum yesterday, and a few other things. It's pretty amazing the extent to which there is rank and file organizing going on throughout the city, and you find out about it each time you go to a meeting. And so what some of us are proposing is the need for a citywide conference to discuss planning how to combat both the atmosphere through a public education campaign. You have the subways, you have the posters that says if you see something, say something. Well, it should include a tax on immigrants, a tax on women. The faces that are up there, there's no visibly Muslim woman. There should be somebody who's visibly immigrant worker, et cetera, et cetera. And just add to that, if you see something, say something, talk about harassment, talk about hate crimes, et cetera, et cetera. The other thing is that we should establish an understanding as to where safe places would be. For instance, the subway token booth, on the buses, in businesses like Ann referred to, having posters put up. This was done a number of years ago around, I forget what the issue was, but there's all sorts of public education that can be done to go against, especially in New York, the idea that Trump has any kind of mandate for his reactionary agenda. So we're floating the idea. I have a written proposal for a citywide conference at some point, create response networks, that there be public service announcements. I mean, these are all things that both involve grassroots, rank and file initiative, but also putting pressure on people who are in a position of power. For instance, the subways, and having a campaign there. So there's a lot more I could say, but I'll stop there.
Okay, is Chris Butters here?
I'm from the Brooklyn Club of the Communist Party. In respect for the time limit, I will leave out a lot of what I was going to say. We are involved in Black Lives Matter, Fight for 15, and other housing struggles. We've also worked on a lot of electoral campaigns, including so-called Trump country, which is not South Carolina or Georgia, but southern Brooklyn and Staten Island. I could tell you more about that. We're in a fight for our lives. I will leave out the reasons to not despair, which I think some of us have known about. We fight for a united front, which means an umbrella where we have disagreements, but we unite in action. We know we on the left can't defeat Trump and his program on our own, but neither can the Democrats or a coalition in which pro-corporate strategies are the leading action. And we think third parties, going for third parties right now, whether in 16 or 18 or 20, isn't an option. We support mass actions and protests obviously the demonstrations in January, the militants of Standing Rock, which remind us of the sit-ins of the civil rights movement and the sit-down strikes in the 30s, and we are sure there's going to be a lot more need for Standing Rock for freedom of the press, defend constitutional rights, labor rights, health care, immigration rights. Here in Brooklyn, we are lucky to have City Council Person Brad Lander. I won't go into that because that was already spoken about, all his wonderful initiatives on behalf of immigrants under attack in Kensington and elsewhere. As New Yorkers, we believe we have a special responsibility to get out the word about Trump because we know better than anybody in the country what he stands for, his role, his disgusting role in the Central Park Five, his abuse of workers and suppliers, and last but not least, the stop and frisk policy, which he celebrates and wants to institute. We want to do everything we can to help make New York a real alternative to the Trump program. In that regard, we want to make sure that New York remains a safe haven for immigrants and their families, take measures to ensure that those who receive health care benefits under the Affordable Care Act are not stripped of coverage, taxing the rich, and climate change. A major obstacle that has not received enough attention is the disgraceful role of Governor Cuomo, who uses the so-called independent Democratic committee to play off pro-Trump Republican minority within the Democratic majority. We join in the Working Families Party and street actions to stiffen Schumer's spine, but also join to demand that the governor and the pro-Trump Republican-engineered legislative... Thank you. Don't mourn, organize. An injury to one is an injury to all, and resist and defeat the Trump program. Thank you.
Thanks, Chris. Is Kim Frazek here? Okay.
We're running an offshore wind campaign. And one of our phrases is, when the winds of change blow, some people build walls and others build windmills. Sane Energy Project was part of a beautiful alliance last year fighting a liquefied natural gas port off the coast of the Rockaways called Port Ambrose, and we won. About a year ago, we won. So this is possible when we all strategically organize together and make Governor Cuomo move. We do know that Donald Trump is a big adversary to offshore wind and to wind in general and to renewable energy. And bringing renewable energy onto the wholesale market grid, in New York State is a really great way to help us reduce our fossil fuel consumption. And we know that fossil fuel consumptions cross the path with racial and economic justice, all types of social justice, food justice. So we really want to work together to make a really big, broad base for offshore wind support. Today, as we are speaking right now, there are 6 bidders that are bidding on the plot of land off the coast of the Rockaways to develop this offshore wind farm. So it's actually coming, and it's coming before the Trump regime gets into power. So we're in a really positive position here. I have 2 flyers that are passed out there. One is a white flyer with our awesome slogan, "To Beat Trump," and there's talking points on the back of it and ways to get in touch with me. And then also there's a blue one because we have an action step. So this Tuesday, December 20th, the Long Island Power Association is having their monthly meeting, and they're going to be deciding on whether they want to start establishing a smaller pilot project off the coast of eastern Long Island. So we want to go out there and show the Long Island Power Association, which is a direct line to Governor Cuomo, that we really, as New Yorkers, want to build a renewable safe haven in New York State. We can actually do this. It's really doable, and it's actually going to happen, but we need all of us to get involved in this campaign because we don't want to just see renewable energy built. We want to see renewable energy built with justice. So we want to make sure our labor is local. We want to make sure our environmental justice communities are taken care of, and it offsets some dirty peaker plants. We can offset peaker energy that we're getting from Indian Point. There's all these things that we can do. So I really hope that you guys all get involved with the energy that's happening in New York State.
I'm representing United Community Center in East New York, and it's a multi-generational organization, multi-service. We are doing immigration. We have been doing immigration for so many years. Early childhood, urban agriculture, and lately our organizing efforts has been around the rezoning in East New York. What we are doing is to try to make affordable housing for East New Yorkers. Most of you know that the city is going to be rezoning 15 neighborhoods across the city, and East New York will be the first one. East New York has been for many, many years what I call the last frontier, because most people thought of East New York the most affordable place, and maybe it's affordable for many people who do not live in East New York, but it's not affordable for East New Yorkers, and that's what we want to keep affordable for East New Yorkers. So we are pushing. In fact, we have a march last Saturday in which we brought down signs, and we have a press conference in front of Quick Evict, which is an organization that is harassing homeowners and pushing for them to sell. Many of them do not know they might be rich in equity in their homes, but really very poor in their pockets, and they have to make decisions that are really well informed.
I think as we're all listening to all of this, and this is in my mind, I suspect many of you as well, how do we set priorities? How do we coordinate? What do we build? And so forth.
Well, I was looking for a common theme to all these different, very interesting groups. The common theme, of course, is the Trump threat. And my feeling is that the first major confrontation that Mr. Trump is going to experience, he is going to be inaugurated, demonstrations notwithstanding, is the Standing Rock situation, which he has been asked about. He said, well, I'm thinking about that. But that is, I think, perhaps that may be one of the areas where support could be generated, because those people are really sticking it out, and they might win, and they're going to be right in Trump's face, and he's going to have to deal with it at the very first start. So I thought maybe that might be a common thread, because it brings together the environment and the confrontation with the new administration.
My name is Joan Hirsch. I live in Brooklyn. I work with Revolution Books in New York. I think it is horrific for us at this point to accept that the Trump-Pence regime will take power. This flyer that I passed out, but it says, we, in the name of humanity, we refuse to accept a fascist regime, and it's using the term fascist for a reason, because that's what it is. And this is unprecedented in the United States. This is the first time that an outright fascist has been elected president. And I think all the things that people said, the efforts and the movements and the organizing that's going on is extremely important, extremely necessary, was needed before, it's needed more now, but we're talking about a qualitatively different situation. I'll make this very quick. But I do want to read something from this flyer. It says, fascism foments and relies on xenophobic nationalism, racism, misogyny, and the aggressive reinstitution of oppressive traditional values. Fascism feeds on and encourages the threat and the use of violence to build a movement and come to power. Fascism, once in power, essentially eliminates traditional democratic rights. Fascism attacks, jails, even executes its opponents, and launches violent mob attacks on minorities. In Nazi Germany in the 30s and 40s, fascism did all these things. This is where this can go. And yes, Hitler himself could talk graciously when he felt it would serve his interests and lull his opponents. People, I'll make this really quick. But this is about where we should go, okay? I think if people are interested, I know. I understand that, but if people are, there is a plan to stop, an actual plan to create the kind of very telescope movement. If you should go to refusefascism.org, and I'll make it, I'll pass out a flyer. I do think people have to actually recognize what we're facing. Okay.
This is not the time for narrowness. It's time for a broad consideration of how to build the broadest coalition of all kinds of people, not just the left, but the center as well, not just Bernie supporters, but Hillary supporters, anybody who wants to join in to oppose the Trump regime and the Trump agenda. We welcome. Even those Trump supporters who will, and there will be them, they will be, they're in for a rude awakening. I want to just talk very quickly about this Sunday. It is National Immigration Day, and there is a march for Immigrant New York. It has very broad sponsorship, including lots of labor community groups, Muslim groups, civil rights groups, all kinds of organizations. It's something that should really be supported. I designed some of those signs today, actually, because Charlotte, our chair, said, can you make some signs for a little Brooklyn Peace contingent? But I'm hoping that our contingent will be not a little contingent, but that people will come out. It starts at Dag Hammarskjöld Plaza at 1 p.m. Everybody knows where that is, right? Across from 47th and 2nd. Across from the UN, that would be first, but okay. It's between first and second. And that's assemble at 1 p.m. this Sunday, and we will march to Trump Tower at 5th Avenue and 56th Street. 4 points. Defend the deferred action for childhood arrivals, which provides New Yorkers and 700,000 plus nationally with work permits. So defend that. Protect immigrant communities from deportation, which is on his agenda. Prevent the creation of a Muslim registry and support refugee resettlement. It's incumbent upon us to put ourselves on the line for our Muslim brothers and sisters and for all immigrants and refugees in the city. In Brooklyn for Peace, we say that war has been the creation, the origin of refugees. It's not the refugees that are the danger, it's war and continuation of war. We have to oppose that.
New York City War Resisters League and National War Tax Resistance. And I guess another issue that connects us all is the federal budget and where all that money is going, and so much of it to the military abroad and militarization at home. So that's, of course, the issue that I'm particularly interested in and working on, but also anxious for some kind of coalition to develop. As with other groups, we are also looking to work together with others, and probably this idea that we have to keep meeting is part of it. Also with National War Tax Resistance, our emphasis this year is, and always really, is divest from the Pentagon, invest in people.
Your help is needed. I have it on very high authority that Santa Claus will be bringing us the revolution for Christmas. In fact, it's already up on YouTube. Google Santa Claus brings revolution for Christmas. And he introduces the public to peacefulrevolution.us, in which he does provide the wording to embrace bringing it all together, the right and the left, a definitive articulation that we can begin to build on. Check it out, YouTube. Santa Claus brings us the revolution.
I'm still friends with a group of people from high school that are a pretty mixed bag politically, and it's really been fascinating to see some of their reactions. So this has the potential, I think, as people have been saying, to really broadly bring people together and unite. I think what would really be very productive and worthwhile would be to put out a call from Brooklyn for Peace or from a coalition of groups even in here for a citywide campaign against hate crimes and attacks on immigrants. NYU, LIU, CUNY Grad School, because really the more you go to these things, the more you realize and hear what people are already doing in their communities. So I think that there needs to be some kind of catalyst, some likely force that could in fact put out a call for a meeting to build a campaign against hate crimes in New York City, and I nominate Brooklyn for Peace.
My name is Marie Edwards, and I came because I was interested in hearing about a lot of different activities, but I'm also wondering if there's anything going on with the March on Washington, the so-called Women's March, and I think to me that's a good place to protest, to see hopefully tens and maybe hundreds of thousands of us, the way we did when Bush was inaugurated, even bigger. But nobody's mentioned it tonight. I was wondering what was going on.
So there are buses going from Park Slope that the Central Brooklyn Independent Democrats are organizing. You can go online and find theirs. And there's a demonstration, that's in Washington, and there's a demonstration in New York at the same time as in Washington at 1 o'clock on the 21st at Union Square. And then there's these demonstrations on the 20th in D.C. too.
Okay, it's behind you, Anthony.
Thank you. No, you're good. You're good. So I wish I could count the number of times I've been in a room and I've heard people say that we need to put together everything that everyone's doing on a calendar, or we need an organization to centralize everything that everyone's doing. So I've heard it a lot. I've never actually seen it carried out to fruition. But what I'm acutely aware of is that there is probably several hundred years of organizing experience in this room. I don't want to make any assumptions. And most of you in this room know that good organizing is built on one-on-one relationship building. So I'm standing here and I'm hearing all of you say, or I'm hearing some people say this, and it makes me think, well, is this a proxy? Is creating a list or creating a new abstract organization supposed to be a proxy for building the one-on-one relationships that we need to build to be able to move different organizations in coalition together? So I have a couple of questions to put to you, but one is, what would it look like for Brooklyn for Peace to do an action, to do something, and to invite other folks in as allies and build relationships through that? Because we know that you don't build relationships in abstract or on coffee dates, but you build trust and relationships by doing things with people. So what would that look like? And another question I want to raise is, there are several thousands of years of organizing experience in this room, and leave there's a lot of privilege in this room. And what does it mean for Brooklyn for Peace to put its privilege, to leverage its privilege to be able to do a lot of the work that you all want to be doing? Specifically white privilege, because it's a very white room, let's be real. But there are lots of other kinds of privilege in this room. There's education privilege. We're all using these big words. Right. So thank you. I thought you left. So those are my two questions. Like, what does it look like for Brooklyn for Peace to be doing something and to use that as a way to build relationships with other groups? And what does it look like for this organization to put leverage lots of privilege in the service of doing some big organizing work?
Of how do you build a united front? I think this is similar to what the sister over here is talking about from the Brooklyn Movement Center. And I think we have an example already in existence of a place to jump off from, and that's the program, the 120-page program of the Movement for Black Lives. I think that it's organized, it's looking at things nationally. It has a lot of things that's not included in there, like the real issue of climate change, the real issue of war. But I think we need to look at national organizing and national programs like that, because we need to act nationally and have a set of demands, such as the demands that were never made at the People's Climate March. We need a set of demands that say protect health care, for example. That's going to be one of the first places that Trump is going to attack. Stop the privatization, stop the neoliberal attacks. They're coming down on everybody. Stop the attacks on immigrants. Stop the attacks on people of color. But have a national program that a broad range of people could unite around. And that's something I think we all need to struggle for.
I just actually wanted to clarify that in calling this meeting tonight, this was not like Brooklyn for Peace imperialism, that we were dragging everybody here so we could be in charge of the world. People really don't understand that. I mean, it really was our intention, to create a space for people to just listen to each other and actually, take away some sense of like what's needed. And then kind of come back and, continue to discuss it. But we're not necessarily, I just don't want people to feel like we're out there saying we are the coalition, right? First of all, if anybody imagines that we're privileged, that would not be totally accurate. And in fact, I would like to encourage people to donate generously to us so we can continue the tasks that we're doing. But I'm actually quite serious about it. I mean, we're listening to each other, we're hearing what the needs are, and we're letting everybody hear sort of hear it, and I think we're going to think some more about where to go forward, and what that should look like. Somebody asked earlier, what's the history of coalitions, and that was like really dangerous because I'm a historian here, so I could potentially speak for 20 hours now on that topic, but I think before there's even a matter of coalition, this kind of goes back to your comment or question. Before there's a coalition, certainly before Brooklyn for Peace creates one, I think one thing that's just coming clear is the need for coordination or knowledge or just communication of what's going on. I suspect that everybody sitting here tonight didn't know half the things that the other people were saying tonight. So, that's even like a step one, is actually just thinking about how can we make sure that people, even in Brooklyn, know the range of things that are going on and what are some of the needs that are being expressed by people where volunteers are, essential. So, to me, that's kind of a baby step. But I want to go back and throw this open to everybody. I just didn't want you to all feel that you're here to say that this one organization is going to solve all the problems, because it isn't.
I wanted to let people know that I didn't know that I was going to be asked to speak about the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network. It was really supposed to be, George Albro, who's one of the facilitators of that, who's a union leader, or Nancy Romer, who many of you know, but she's sick and asked me to tell you that she can't be here tonight. But the reason I've taken the microphone again is to tell you that the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network has been created in order to perhaps, just perhaps, serve as the clearinghouse that many of you are talking about, because we are looking to have groups, disparate groups, join our organization as chapter members and as affiliates. And it would be the kind of organization that diverse groups could participate in, from East New York to any of the others who have spoken tonight. So I just wanted to make it clear that the Brooklyn Progressive Action Network is looking to build that kind of a coalition and those kinds of linkages, as does the entire New York State Progressive Action Coalition wish to do.
Hello, my name is Kenneth Sullivan. I'm a producer of a cable access show here in Brooklyn called Ground Zero. This young lady here, I come from an institution where she taught at a city college, Center of Worker Education. That's where I learned this craft. And I'm here to talk about basically the 800-pound gorilla that's in the room that that nobody's talking about. As we know in the news right now, they're talking about Boris and Natasha. If you don't familiar with Rocky and Bullwinkle, they're trying to say that the Russians are responsible for Trump. Whereas we know, especially if you supported Bernie Sanders back in the primary, we know who the culprit was, and that was the corporate news media. And one of the people, Les Muniz of CBS, he said this about the bonanza that they made off of Trump, the ratings bonanza, the money that they made. And this is what he said: "It may not be good for America, but it's damn good for CBS." Okay? So if we really have a culprit in here, and all of these groups that are in here, we have a common adversary, and that is the corporate news media in this country. It's something that the left, I've seen movements about reform, but we haven't really gotten there with it. We talk about the internet all the time, but we seem in this country like we see terrestrial radio and television to the right wing, and we talk about preventing war, where the corporate news media is used to manufacture consent among the population for these wars. We have to understand that the corporate news media is an adversary, and the left has to grapple with trying to reform this news media in this country. Not like this current administration did, where they put somebody in there that used to be a lobbyist for the telecommunications industry, and he gave campaign dollars to Obama. Somebody more progressive should have been the head of the FCC. That's something that in these movements that are going to come, the left has to really have a movement of reform of the media in this country.
That there is an upsurge throughout the borough, throughout the country, and it's happening. And the question we keep saying is, how do we do it? How do we pull ourselves together? I think what we have to do is we have to trust in the upsurge, call the organizations that we're aware of, some of whom were a surprise to us tonight by some of us, but there are many more. Put a call out in Brooklyn and get people together and see what comes from that. In other words, bring people together and let that germinate. And I think that's a step we should begin. Now, the question is who should call it, whether it should be NIPAN, whether it should be NIPAN or Brooklyn Progressive Action Network, however you want to call it, or Brooklyn for Peace. Maybe it should be Brooklyn, the Brooklyn Movement, and it should be 3 or 4 lead organizations that have credibility and can pull people together. And I think, call for a borough-wide meeting. You had 2,000 people that went to the Garfield synagogue 3 weeks ago. I mean, it was incredible. And there are thousands of people who are ready to get into motion. And I think we have to step up and do it.
We need to think nationally. The reason we're all here is because we're facing a national threat. But additionally, I want to say that, we know almost for sure that bad things are going to happen. And so I think in addition to the things that have been talked about so far this evening, that there needs to be a lot of focus now amongst us all, wherever we are, whatever we're doing, on tactics. What are we going to do in certain contingencies? I think we're going to need to be a lot more militant than we've been any time lately, and that we need to start thinking about, for example, civil disobedience tactics that dramatize situations, dramatize issues, dramatize threats to individuals and groups. So that's my pitch. I just want to say tactics.
The people who've talked about building coalitions, I do think we need to, acknowledge the fact that this is a room of privilege in the sense that we're mostly a white group of people, and that, we do need to acknowledge that. We do need to move across. Before we get national, let's get across Brooklyn. Let's move. Let's get together with organizations that are all across this wonderful borough of ours. And I want to back up what Martha said also, which is that there is a platform, the Movement for Black Lives platform, which I have read, although I haven't studied, does lay out all of the issues that we've talked about tonight. And it would be, I think it would be a very good idea for folks to look it up online and read it, and use that as a starting point. Thank you.
Speaking about what privilege to leverage, I just moved here from Washington, D.C., where we have taxation without representation, and I haven't I'm so excited to have elected officials to hold accountable. I'd like to, I would really like to be doing that. And then but that is a privilege that we have. And we're talking about defending undocumented immigrants. That's something that they don't have. We have our vote, and we need to really be after these people. And the other thing is the goal of this, one of the goals of fascism is to create a slave economy. And what all the people that he's putting in this cabinet are people who are standing to make financial profit. And another thing that we can leverage is our economic power, and is to boycott and to hold accountable all the companies and all the individuals that are standing to profit from this regime. We really need to go after them and name them and hold them accountable. They're all lining up, to make money, and they say they want to create jobs. I know they want to create slave labor jobs. So that is, those are some of the privileges that we can leverage, our vote and our economic power.
But hang on a second. Talking about privilege, I want to exercise mine for just 1 second and say that one of the things that's been very important to me, and I would suggest it to other people, is that short of building coalitions, people should go to the meetings of other groups and find out who they are, what they're doing, and become acquainted with groups in your neighborhood and groups in the neighborhoods next to you.
I'm going to ask you once again, if you're interested in going on the National Women's March, remember this website, cbidems.org. How many seniors in the audience? I don't know what a senior is. $35 round trip. They only have 2 buses. Do it fast. CBIDEMS.org. $35 round trip. Leaves from Park Slope, 4:30 in the morning. Comes back that night. You can sleep on the bus. Go to the website and do it.
I actually really want to express appreciation to everybody who came out tonight on not the most wonderful night to be here. And I think it expresses, the tremendous concern that we have. And thank the people from different groups who've come and spoken. And thank the patience of the audience here as we've tried to listen to a lot of things. And again, to acknowledge what I thought was probably going to be true at the beginning, that this is really a learning evening. And there's a lot more things to happen. I think we'll all, Brooklyn for Peace, and, it's not this great Politburo that has all these phenomenal answers to all these questions. Yeah. I think we sometimes do. Right? But all of us, hopefully, from just being here this evening, will begin thinking about what are some of the next steps that we can take. And I think for all of us, and I think I speak for all of us, that one thing that is absolutely clear, which is that all of us together have to find a way to resist what's coming. And I think we're going to do that work. So thank you again.
I do want to announce this actual meeting. Is this on?
It's on. I don't know if anybody's going to hear it.
Okay.
No, it's too late.
Is this on? Okay, everybody, I do want to announce Monday night at Cooper Union at 7 o'clock. We are facing something unprecedented, and we have to do something unprecedented, all right, which is actually mobilized to stop the Trump-Pence regime before they take power. There's a plan to do it. Cooper Union, 7 o'clock. Go to refusefascism.org and find out about it and give me your contact information. Thank you.